You begin to notice it in the smallest hours of your life, in the space where no one is watching you hold yourself together. The fatigue doesn't come all at once. It settles quietly, like dusk seeping across a room. That slow dimming of light you don't fight, because you've fought enough. There is a moment, maybe you've lived it many times, when the phone rings long after you should have been asleep. You answer because you always have. Your voice softens itself, even when your heart feels thin. And when the call ends, you sit there in the dark, listening to the silence you've postponed once again. It feels like a gentle ache behind the ribs. Not pain exactly, but something so familiar you no longer question it. You tell yourself you're being kind. You tell yourself this is simply what it means to care. But in the quiet of your kitchen, with the dim morning light brushing the counter where yesterday's cup still rests, you feel the heaviness that kindness sometimes brings. A heaviness you've learned to hide from others, even from yourself. There is a single metaphor that stays with you these days: the fading light. Not the sunset itself, but the in-between moment when the world hasn't yet gone dark, yet everything appears washed out and tired. That is what your giving has begun to feel like. A light stretching itself too thin, trying to reach what never reaches back. You stand in a doorway one evening, maybe your own, maybe someone else's, and you realize how many doors you've held open for people who never stepped fully inside. You've explained yourself until the words felt hollow. You've forgiven what no one apologized for. You've waited for someone to meet you halfway, only to find yourself walking the entire distance, again and again, until your steps felt like surrender. And somewhere within you, quiet but unmistakable, a recognition arrives. A truth not spoken out loud, but felt. You have been carrying too much of what was never yours to hold. And in that soft recognition, you simply breathe, without reaching for anyone. There is a reason you give so much, though you rarely speak it aloud. It isn't generosity alone. It isn't virtue. It's something quieter, something woven into the way you learn to exist in the presence of others. Somewhere along the way, the idea settled into you that to be good is to be needed, and to be needed is to be safe. We uncover this together, gently, as if brushing dust from an old photograph. You didn't wake up one morning and choose to overextend yourself. It happened slowly, shaped by moments that taught you love was something earned through effort, through endurance, through saying yes, even when your heart whispered no. You believed, maybe without knowing, that your relevance depends on your usefulness. And so the invisible contracts began. Little vows you made without words. If I show up, they won't leave. If I make things easier, they'll understand me. If I stay calm, they'll finally love me in the way I long for. These contracts are never signed, yet they bind you all the same. You might remember the night you called someone just to hear a voice, and they didn't answer. Not out of cruelty. They simply didn't think of you in the way you thought of them. And instead of feeling disappointed, you felt guilty for wanting anything at all. You told yourself you were fine. You turned the light off, convincing your own heart that its small wish had been too much to ask. Or maybe there was a moment when someone said, "I'm fine," and you heard the hidden tremor behind the words. You stepped in, repaired what wasn't yours to fix, offered comfort before it was requested. You became the steady hands in other people's storms, even when your own roof was leaking. And each time you did, a part of you felt strangely relieved, as if your place in the world had been reaffirmed. We grow used to this, don't we? To mistaking our disappearance for kindness, to confusing silence with strength, to believing that if we take up less space, others will draw closer. But somewhere beneath the guilt, beneath the practiced selflessness, a small recognition stirs. You have been giving everything in the hope that someone might finally notice you're empty. And the paradox is this: the more you disappear for others, the more invisible you become to yourself. There comes a moment, not loud, not dramatic, when you finally see what your kindness has been costing you. It doesn't arrive with anger. It arrives with light, the kind that slips beneath a closed door and shows the shape of the room you've been living in. For the first time, you notice how small that room has become. You look at your hands, the same hands that have lifted others again and again, and you realize how steady they appear only because you've learned to ignore their trembling. You've carried everyone so carefully that you forgot the simple fact that you too have weight. And the shock, the quiet, unmistakable shock, is not that others have taken too much. It's that you offered more than a human heart can hold, believing this was goodness, believing this was love. There is a natural analogy that drifts into your mind, uninvited but true. Even the sun, generous as it is, cannot shine through every window without burning itself out. You begin to understand that your light too is finite, not a punishment, not a failure, simply the truth of being alive. You start to see the pattern. Every time you softened your voice so someone else could stay comfortable. Every time you swallowed your exhaustion so another person wouldn't feel alone. Every time you walked into a room ready to repair its broken air, without once asking who repairs you. This is the turning point. Not the end of your kindness, but the end of offering it at the cost of yourself. You notice how often you've stood at half-open doors, waiting for people who never stepped through. How many times you pressed your palm against the wood, keeping it open just a little longer, just in case. But now you feel the strain in your arm, the ache in your shoulder. You feel the weight of that door, and for the first time, you understand you don't have to hold it. There is sadness here, yes. The sadness of seeing how you vanished inside your own generosity. But there is relief as well, a gentle exhale, a loosening of the chest, because clarity is a form of release. You finally grasp the truth that eluded you for so long. You were never meant to disappear in order to be loved. And the aphorism that remains, soft but certain. A kindness that costs your selfhood is only another way of leaving yourself behind. There comes a day when you stop answering out of obligation, not out of bitterness, not out of anger, simply because something inside you has grown still. The phone buzzes on the table, a familiar name appearing on the screen, and you watch it without moving. The sound feels distant, like a memory of who you used to be, and for the first time, you let it fade into silence. You're not punishing anyone. You're not withholding affection. You're recognizing that your presence is no longer something to be summoned on demand. There's a quiet dignity in that, a calm refusal that doesn't need words. Boundaries begin to appear not as walls, but as thresholds, gentle lines where you choose to step back into yourself. They feel like the subtle closing of a door you've kept open far too long, not with force, but with a steady hand, finally releasing the weight. On the other side, life continues. On your side, the room expands. You notice how peaceful the house becomes when you stop rushing to every call of distress that isn't yours. How the air settles, like wind moving through curtains at dawn, a reminder that not every stirring requires your response. There is a strange liberation in letting the world be what it is without trying to hold it together. People may wonder why you've grown quieter, but silence has its own language, one that speaks without explanation. I am choosing what does not drain me. I am choosing myself. There is no accusation in it, no shadow of blame, only self-respect, standing softly in the doorway. You begin to understand that refusal can be a form of love, not for others, but for the part of you that learned to bend until it nearly broke. Confrontation was never your way, but absence can protect what confrontation only bruises. Absence preserves your energy. Absence teaches others to carry their own weight. Absence returns you to your center. You don't announce your departure. You don't prepare a speech or craft a reason. You simply no longer show up in places where your spirit collapses. And in that quiet withdrawal, something powerful awakens. The sense that your life belongs to you again. You close the door gently, and in the soft hush that follows, the rooms of your world grow still. There is a kind of love that does not rush toward others. It does not pour itself out in endless explanations or apologies. It does not chase. It does not cling. It simply steps back, gently, the way a lantern is set down in a quiet room, still shining, but no longer carried into every dark corner. You begin to understand this form of love only when you've given too much of yourself for too long. At first, distance feels like retreat, like the world narrowing, but in time, you see it differently. Distance becomes space, a threshold between your life and the lives of those you care for, a delicate line that keeps everyone in their rightful place. Let the metaphor be a house, your house, the place where your inner world lives. For years, you left the door open wide, even in the cold. Anyone could enter at any hour. People walked through your rooms with heavy steps, leaving their worries on your tables, their grief on your floors. You lit every lamp to comfort them, even when your hands were shaking. You told yourself this was love, and maybe it was, but it was love without rhythm, love without rest. Now, you begin to close the door, not fully, just enough. Enough to protect the warmth inside. Enough to keep the wind from sweeping through and scattering everything you've been trying to hold together. You tend to your light, not with urgency, but with quiet devotion. You sweep the floors. You let the late afternoon sun move across the room without interruption. You sit finally in your own chair, hearing the soft hum of a space that has missed you. This distance is not absence. It is a boundary that allows love to breathe. It turns chaos into harmony, need into presence, exhaustion into clarity. When someone knocks now, you open the door with intention, not fear. You greet them without emptying yourself. You let them stand on the threshold long enough to see that your house is no longer a place where they can leave the weight of their world. You are not rejecting anyone. You are simply learning how to stay whole. And in this wholeness, silence becomes something tender, a way of saying, I care for you, but I must also care for the light that keeps my home alive. The gentlest love is the kind that knows when to step back. There is a moment, quiet and almost unnoticed, when you realize you are no longer holding on, not trying, not reaching, not hoping that someone will finally turn toward you with the fullness you once gave without hesitation. You simply exhale, and the weight that once lived in your chest drifts outward, as if it was waiting for your permission to leave. This is the release. Not a dramatic parting, not a declaration, not even a decision. It's the soft undoing of a pattern that became too heavy to carry another day. The fatigue that pushed you inward has done its work. The clarity that followed has settled. And now you stand in a place that feels unfamiliar only because it is peaceful. You begin to notice how much room there is inside you when guilt no longer dictates your movements, when you no longer feel responsible for the storms others refuse to calm, when you stop mistaking self-abandonment for compassion. You don't replay conversations anymore, wondering if you should have said more, done more, offered more. There is nothing more to offer from an empty well. And now, finally, it is no longer empty, only quiet. There is a grace in this stage of letting go. You don't erase anyone. You don't harden your heart. You simply stop walking toward what never walked toward you. It feels less like loss and more like drifting back into your own skin, your own time, your own breath. You may think back to the moments when you stretched yourself thin, trying to keep connections alive that were never truly shared. But those memories no longer carry heat. They have cooled, like stones after sunset, still part of the landscape, but no longer burning your hands to touch them. This calm is not indifference, it is dignity. It is the understanding that love, to be real, must flow naturally, not be chased, negotiated, or begged for. You do not need to explain your distance. Peace needs no explanation. And the life waiting for you beyond these old patterns asks only one thing, that you step into it without the weight of who you once tried to be for others. You walk forward lightly. You leave no door slammed behind you. Nothing is broken. Nothing is taken. You are simply free in a way that feels honest. And the truth that remains, clear as morning air. You haven't lost them. You've finally returned to yourself.